America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all out offensive.
What you saw right there was President Richard Nixon in 1971 declaring the war on drugs, addressing this to American people. Hey, this is Narain Manikandan, and I am presenting you just this, the war on drugs. All right, so let's look at the start. Again, in 1971, he declared a war on drugs. So the major goals of this initiative was to combat drug trafficking, to reduce crime that was really caused by drugs, and to protect public health. So really what President Nixon was trying to do was to eradicate all drug use by incarcerating these users, essentially putting them behind bars. But then comes Reagan from 1981 to 1989. So he focused a lot more on criminal punishment over treatment. So incarcerations for even non-violent drug offenses were from over 50,000 in 1980, but went up to 400,000 in 1997. And so these actions really caused increased public nervousness and stigma towards drug abuse. This initiative actually helped drive a political support for Reagan's stance, and it really helped him toward gain supporters towards this issue, and really brought down other people who were fighting for decriminalization. During his presidency was when most of the racial differences started to occur. Now you can see this in the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986. So 1.7 billion dollars were allocated towards this, and then you can see the breakdown of where those specifically where the money went to. So one of the main big problems and one of the effects was that with drug conviction, you are restricted access to certain federal programs, such as like housing or any type of aid. And but really, the worst part of this was mandatory minimum sentences. So this is a type of draconian penalty that really harmed many communities, but especially Black communities, especially because of this disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine. Just 5 grams of crack cocaine compares to 500 grams of powder cocaine, but this amounts to the same 5-year prison sentence. So this actually means that there's a 1 to 100 crack versus powder cocaine sentencing disparity, even though they both are really the same drug. They're just manufactured and used differently. And so with this, you could really see where this is going. You could really see the purpose, what people thought of it, and eventually what the impacts were. So here's another excerpt from Eric Sterling on mandatory minimum sentences, which was something that the Anti Drug Abuse Act enforced. It was a type of penalty that had been removed from federal law in 1970 after extensive and careful consideration. But in 1986, no hearings were held on this idea. No experts on the relevant issues, no judges, and no one from the Bureau of Prisons or from any other office in the government provided advice on the idea before it was rushed through the committee and into law. And so here you can see that all the legislation that came from the drug war was really just rushed and mainly there for political reasons to continue stigmatizing different populations and kind of to maintain the effects. All right, so we see all of these negative effects, but why was the program itself really bad? Why couldn't these effects just be that the Americans are using more drugs? Well, here are a few facts. So first, there's the balloon effect, where it's kind of like squeezing a balloon really just moves the air around, never completely compresses the air. This is the same thing with drug production, where pushing down drug production in one region just causes it to bulge somewhere else. As you can see in this first graph, even though the drug production in Peru went down, Colombia's drug manufacturing went up, and so this is kind of showing this balloon effect. And a real life example was crystal meth. Um, so the US heavily started regulating it. But then what actually happened was that there just became a way higher supply of it in Mexico. And so this was kind of known as like a poor person's drug, where it was really cheap. And so everyone's in Mexico and the US started using it. And what actually happened was that the manufacturers made this a more potent drug. Now, I'll show you a few clips of them manufacturing this drug.
But that hasn't stopped people from making the drug. This lab in the city of Culiacan is thought to have produced 40 metric tons of the synthetic drug.
Now let's take a look at the Drug Enforcement Administration. So for a long time, this administration had rapid growth, but you could kind of see what it has done. It has confiscated 477 million dollars worth of drugs through seizures. But the value of drugs sold in the U.S. was 64 billion. So when we do the math, This has a less than 1% efficiency rating. Now, this is like the craziest graph I've seen relating to the drug war. Now, we can look at the US state and federal prison population, right? And in the x axis, there's the year, and then in the y axis, there's the number of people. Up until around 1981, the prison population was relatively stable, but then it boosted all the way up to around 1.5 million people in 2014. And this really, as you can see, it was mainly due to this drug war that this huge increase occurred. Now, Oregon was the first state which actually decriminalized all drugs by passing the Measure 110 legislation. So they focused more on health services over criminalization, which was the primary method used before during the drug war. And so it transferred from a misdemeanor to a Class E violation. So instead of paying large fines for possession, you pay a $100 fine, but this could be waived by reporting to a treatment center. However, Oregon saw a 20% surge in overdose deaths in a year. Now I'll show you a video of the effect of this legislation.
See this guy right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, watch this.
What's he doing?
He's probably smoking fentanyl. See that?
Yeah.
And we're like, we're in what's basically a police car. It's unmarked, but like, we're pretty obviously the police. Hi there, put that knife away, please. What are you smoking?
Betty.
Okay, just
Yeah.
powder fentanyl?
Yeah.
Is that what you drop right there?
Yeah.
Right there?
Yeah.
Can you pick that up so someone else doesn't find it or a kid doesn't find that, please?
Under Measure 110, Bayer writes a $100 ticket. The fine will be waived if this man phones a treatment hotline.
All in all, most people agree that the war on drugs was a huge fail, mainly because of its effects, like its racial effects, really like the ineffectiveness and like the wrong approach towards reducing drug abuse. This is kind of lighting many different reforms, many different initiatives, many different legislations that are trying to mitigate the effects, kind of right the wrongs. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you learned something about this period in American history.